This man was forced to wear a wig his entire life for one of the most disturbing reasons imaginable. In 1927, 5-year-old Vertus Hardiman was taken with several other black children in rural Mississippi to what parents were told was a harmless treatment for scalp ringworm. Instead, physicians connected to the U.S. Public Health Service exposed the children to massive amounts of radiation in an experiment that blasted their scalps with X-rays powerful enough to destroy hair follicles. Soon afterward, the children reportedly suffered agonizing burns, open sores, swelling, infections, and patches of skin that peeled away from their heads. Hardiman later described the smell of his scalp burning and said the pain became so severe he could barely sleep. Large sections of his scalp were permanently scarred and left unable to grow hair again, forcing him to wear wigs and hats for the rest of his life to hide the damage and humiliation. Some of the other children reportedly developed tumors and chronic health problems in the years that followed. Hardiman rarely spoke publicly about the experiment until later on in life, but despite decades of pain and trauma, he reportedly still believed bitterness and hatred were pointless.
It has to be liquidated. We have to get rid of that. That's a burden. We can't buy it.
It's Dr. Paul.
That was the moment former presidential candidate Ron Paul suffered a stroke during a live 2020 interview after the 85-year-old began slurring his words and speaking incoherently before becoming visibly disoriented. From the person experiencing it, a stroke can feel terrifying and confusing, as parts of the brain suddenly begin shutting down from a lack of blood flow, sometimes causing speech to not make sense, thoughts to become scrambled, vision to blur, or parts of the body to suddenly feel numb, weak, or impossible to control. The live stream quickly cut away as viewers realized something was seriously wrong. Ron was later hospitalized, where doctors confirmed he had suffered a stroke, though he eventually recovered and returned to public appearances. In 2010, 45-year-old Malcolm MacDonald from Norfolk, England, developed a severe blood infection that caused his Count Shaftula to turn black and eventually detach from his body. After years of depression and isolation, surgeons created a replacement using skin, blood vessels, and nerves taken from his arm, where the new organ remained attached for about 6 years while it developed its own blood supply. Multiple delays, including medical complications and the COVID-19 pandemic, reportedly left MacDonald living with an Obi-Wan Kenobi hanging from his forearm for years, before surgeons were finally able to complete the reconstruction procedure. This was the moment an idiot tried crossing train tracks with his bike just seconds before a train came roaring through. As the crossing lights flashed, he suddenly tripped and fell directly onto the tracks in the path of the oncoming train. But he managed to grab his bike and escape just moments before the train came flying past him. He managed to escape literally a half a second before the several hundred-ton locomotive would have almost certainly turned him into human paste upon impact. Speaking of idiots, this man just narrowly avoided being sliced in half by a circular saw. He was apparently cutting into wall tile when he suddenly slipped, causing him to fall directly on top of it. Somehow, the saw barely missed his stomach and torso, as he even had to lift his shirt to make sure his intestines were still inside his body. This was the moment a family hanging out in their driveway suddenly realized they weren't alone when a massive black bear casually pulled up behind them. Ring camera footage captured the exact second one of the kids spotted the animal and softly yelled "bear," before immediately abandoning the rest of the family to save himself first. Within seconds, everyone ran to the door while the bear continued minding his own business. Although black bears are usually shy and avoid humans, they can become extremely dangerous if cornered, startled, or provoked, especially around food or cubs. Here's a video of a cannon being fired to trigger an avalanche, a controlled safety procedure used in mountainous regions to reduce the risk of dangerous, unpredictable slides. By firing explosives or specialized avalanche cannons into unstable snowpack, crews can release smaller avalanches on their own terms before pressure builds into something large enough to threaten roads, ski resorts, or local communities. The goal isn't to create destruction, but to stabilize slopes by releasing weak layers of snow that could otherwise collapse later under the weight of new snowfall or passing skiers. Timing, weather data, and snowpack analysis all play a role in deciding when a controlled release is necessary. I don't know what to say. This girl was filming herself when she accidentally captured an unbelievable meteorite breaking apart in the skies above Portugal. This guy who lives in Alaska saw that video and said, "Hold my beer." The aurora borealis forms when charged particles from the sun interact with the Earth's magnetic field and gases in the upper atmosphere. Oxygen typically produces green or red light, while nitrogen can appear blue or purple. These reactions happen about 60 to 200 miles above the surface, which is why the lights look like they're moving across the entire night sky. This was the moment a climber completely lost control while descending Mount Risi. On a steep, snow-covered slope, he slipped, dropped his ice axe, and instantly lost his only way of stopping himself. Within seconds, he was tumbling head over heels down a roughly 45-degree incline, sliding and cartwheeling for nearly 600 meters while another climber's headcam captured the entire thing. But miraculously, after the uncontrolled slide finally stopped, he was somehow still conscious. He survived with only bruises and minor pain in his finger, and after being checked by a doctor in the group, he was able to stand up and walk down the mountain himself. This was the horrifying moment an Instagram free climber was forced into a dangerous descent while scaling an electrical tower. With no harness, no clips, and nothing but a strong grip keeping him alive, he was already hundreds of feet above the ground when a massive swarm of bees suddenly surrounded him. As the bees began attacking, he couldn't panic or swat them away without risking his life. Every movement had to stay controlled, since one small shift of weight could have easily sent him falling straight down. But despite the chaos, he maintained his composure, descending level by level, until he finally reached a safe enough height to jump and escape the swarm. Trailer Park Boys star Mike Smith, best known as the harmless wide-eyed Bubbles, has been charged with sexual assault in Nova Scotia for an incident that allegedly happened back in 2017, a case that stayed buried for nearly 8 years before finally surfacing in court. The identity of the victim is under a strict publication ban, but Smith is now legally barred from contacting them or going anywhere near their work, home, or school. The charge has forced him to step away from the Trailer Park Boys production company, tainting the wholesome persona millions have associated with him. Deep inside a sulfur-filled cave on the Albania-Greece border, scientists have uncovered the largest spiderweb ever recorded, an enormous 106-meter sheet stretched across the cavern's walls. Hundreds of thousands of spiders from 2 normally rival species have formed a massive cooperative colony, a terrifying behavior never before seen in spiders. The cave's toxic, sunless environment created a self-sustaining ecosystem powered by sulfur-eating microbes, which attracted swarms of insects, which in turn supplied this spider megacity with endless food. The web is so dense and vast it looks like the cave is wrapped in ghostly white fabric, proof that life can evolve into something terrifyingly efficient when pushed into extreme conditions. Here's a photo of a young girl in Lopburi, Thailand carrying an airsoft gun to defend her food from the city's massive population of wild macaque monkeys. After years of tourists feeding them, Lopburi's monkey population completely exploded, and during COVID, food shortages caused large groups of starving monkeys to become increasingly aggressive toward businesses and pedestrians. Videos from the city have shown hundreds of macaques swarming streets, fighting each other in massive brawls, and snatching food directly from people's hands, leading some locals to carry weapons just to walk through certain areas safely. 1981, 25-year-old John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate U.S. President Ronald Reagan outside of a hotel in Washington, D.C. after becoming obsessively fixated on actress Jodie Foster and believing the attack would impress her. Hinckley fired 6 shots within seconds, seriously wounding Reagan after a bullet ricocheted into his chest and narrowly missed his heart. Press Secretary James Brady was shot in the head and left permanently disabled, with his death in 2014 later being ruled a homicide linked to the shooting, while a Secret Service agent and police officer were also wounded. Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity and spent decades confined to a psychiatric hospital before being gradually released under strict supervision, while Jodie Foster was in fact not impressed by the attack. The results of Michael Jackson's autopsy report were nothing short of disturbing. He was largely bald with only sparse hair remaining, the result of burns and repeated cosmetic procedures, as he'd been wearing a wig in public for years. His scalp also showed scarring consistent with past injuries. He had multiple cosmetic tattoos, including permanent eyeliner and lip liner, likely done to maintain his appearance without daily makeup. His skin also showed signs of vitiligo alongside extensive cosmetic alteration. His arms were marked with numerous puncture wounds, consistent with frequent injections over time. Toxicology findings showed multiple drugs in his system and partially dissolved pills in his stomach, indicating recent ingestion. The cause of death was ruled acute propofol intoxication, a powerful surgical anesthetic. In the the final months of his life, Michael was given propofol regularly inside his home to induce sleep, essentially relying on anesthesia instead of natural slumber. His personal physician, Conrad Murray, was later convicted of involuntary manslaughter for administering the drug outside of proper medical care. In 2024, 17-year-old Sha Ray was the sole survivor of a family murder-suicide after police say his father killed his mother, his 11-year-old brother, and his 8 and 2-year-old sisters before turning the gun on himself. Sha Ray was found alive in the family garage with a gunshot wound to his head. He miraculously survived, but the injury left him permanently blind and facing lifelong medical complications. Despite the trauma and severe injuries, Sha Ray went on to enroll at the University of Utah in 2025, beginning his freshman year just months after losing his entire immediate family. Tragically, just 1 week after starting college, he passed away from natural causes. This was the shocking moment her family realized they'd made a horrific mistake. In Thailand, a 65-year-old woman who was presumed dead stunned mourners when she suddenly started knocking from inside her coffin just moments before cremation. Her family had believed she'd passed away after appearing to stop breathing 2 days earlier, so she was transported hundreds of miles to a Bangkok area temple for her funeral. But just as monks were preparing the cremation rites, staff heard faint thuds coming from the coffin and opened it to find her alive, barely moving, eyes fluttering, and severely weakened from critically low blood sugar. Temple workers later said the knocking was so faint they almost dismissed it as part of the ritual drum sounds, meaning she was seconds away from being burned alive without anyone noticing. The discovery sparked outrage over how she was declared dead without a medical exam, and how close she came to cremation after laying unconscious in a sealed coffin for 2 days. She was rushed to the hospital and is now in stable condition, recovering under medical supervision after narrowly surviving her own funeral. At 89 years old, Alice and Ellen Kessler, the iconic twin performers who spent decades dancing in perfect sync, chose to die the same way they lived, side by side. On November 17, 2025, the twins underwent a medically assisted death together inside their home near Munich, a procedure they had planned, consented to, and carried out themselves, using life-ending medication supplied legally through Germany's Right to Die framework. Police found no signs of foul play, a doctor and a lawyer were involved, and officials said the decision was well considered with no evidence of crisis or coercion. Assisted suicide has been legal in Germany since a landmark 2020 ruling that affirmed a person's constitutional right to a self-determined death, as long as the act is voluntary and self-administered. After a lifetime of shared stages, shared fame, and shared identity, the Kessler twins made one final synchronized exit, even requesting that their ashes be placed in the same urn. In November of 2020, Zhang Bo and his girlfriend Yi Cheng-chen murdered Zhang's 2 young children by throwing them from a 15th-floor apartment in Chongqing. Investigators eventually determined the killings were planned. Yi reportedly viewed the children as obstacles to her future with Zhang, while Zhang disabled surveillance cameras and waited until neighbors were unlikely to notice before carrying out the horrific act. After the deaths, he attempted to portray the incident as an accident, even returning to the scene and showing visible grief. Medical examiners confirmed both children died from multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a high-rise fall. Chinese courts described the crime as extremely cruel and noted the betrayal of parental duty as an aggravating factor. Both defendants were sentenced to death in 2021, appeals were rejected, and the sentences were approved by China's Supreme People's Court. The executions were carried out in January of 2024. This was the final footage of Chiara Giaconis just moments before she'd be tragically killed. In 2024 in Naples, Italy, 30-year-old Prada manager Chiara Giaconis was on what was supposed to be a dream birthday trip with her boyfriend when she was walking through a narrow street in the historic center. As they passed beneath an apartment balcony, a decorative stone statuette was suddenly thrown from above, striking her in the head with enough force to cause catastrophic injuries. She would end up tragically dying from the impact. Investigators determined the object had been thrown by a 13-year-old boy inside the apartment, who had reportedly been tossing several items from the balcony beforehand. But because he was under 14, he could not be criminally charged under Italian law, even though his actions led directly to her death. Prosecutors instead charged the boy's parents with manslaughter, arguing that the death was completely preventable and that they failed to properly supervise him. Parents have denied any wrongdoing, maintaining they couldn't have possibly anticipated what happened. As the case continues, the focus remains on whether their level of supervision meets the threshold for criminal responsibility in a situation where a single impulsive act turned fatal within seconds. During the midnight premiere of The Dark Knight Rises in Aurora, Colorado, a 24-year-old shooter entered the packed theater through an emergency exit wearing full body armor, tossed gas canisters into the crowd, and opened fire with an AR-15, a shotgun, and a Glock. In just 90 seconds, he fired more than 70 rounds, killing 12 and injuring dozens more as movie sound effects mixed with real screams. Among the victims was Alex Sullivan, celebrating his 27th birthday and first wedding anniversary, Jessica Gawi, a 24-year-old reporter who'd narrowly escaped a Toronto mall shooting just weeks earlier, and 6-year-old Veronica Moser, who was killed instantly beside her 25-year-old mother, Ashley. Ashley was shot in the neck and abdomen, left paralyzed, and lost her unborn baby, later waking up in the hospital repeatedly asking where Veronica was, not realizing she was gone. The shooter was found calmly waiting outside, calling himself the Joker, while police discovered his apartment rigged with explosives meant to kill the investigators who entered. His notebook revealed a cold plan to maximize casualties, as he was sentenced to 12 life terms plus 3,300 years, but survivors say no punishment could ever possibly match the horror inflicted on that night. In one of the most evil cases of betrayal ever recorded, a man from New Zealand secretly infected his wife with HIV using a sewing needle dipped in his own blood. After cheating on her and being diagnosed himself, he feared she would leave him. So while she slept, he pricked her leg, leaving only a tiny sting and a red mark. Months later, during a routine checkup, she tested positive for the virus and confronted him. He chillingly confessed, saying he only did it so she would be the same as me and would never leave. Prosecutors later called it an act of pure cruelty, and the man was sentenced to prison for willfully injecting another with a disease, a charge so rare that even the judge called it almost without precedent. In 2010, 7-year-old Ayanna Stanley Jones was sleeping on her grandmother's couch in Detroit when a police raid quickly turned deadly. Officers were filming for the A&E show The First 48 as they stormed the home in search of a murder suspect, tossing in a flash grenade before bursting through the door. Within seconds, a bullet fired by Officer Joseph Weekly struck Ayanna in the head, killing her instantly. The officer claimed the gun discharged accidentally after a struggle, but witnesses said he just fired blindly into the darkened home. No one was ever convicted for her death. Ayanna would have turned 25 this year, a haunting reminder of how a child's life was tragically cut short in a moment meant for TV. In the early 1980s, South Korean photographer Lee Dong-sik was convicted of murdering a woman just so he could photograph her dying. Reports from a Korean newspaper say he met the victim, gave her a drink laced with potassium cyanide, and took more than 20 photographs as she slowly died in agony. During questioning, he claimed he wanted to capture the moment of death as part of his art. He was soon arrested, charged with her murder, and executed 4 years later. This was the moment when a typical news broadcast turned into an outright nightmare for CBS reporter Lara Logan. On the night of February 11, 2011, as Egypt erupted in celebration over the resignation of their president, Lara Logan was in Cairo documenting the historic moment with her CBS crew for more than an hour, until their camera battery suddenly died and they stopped to regroup. Her local translator then heard the crowd say things like, "Let's take her pants off," and a night of celebration quickly turned into pure terror for the journalist. Suddenly separated from her bodyguards and translators, Logan was swallowed by a crowd of 200 to 300 men who suddenly turned on her in a violent sexual assault. Her clothes were torn, she was dragged, beaten, and by her account, raped with their hands while others filmed on cell phones. She struggled to breathe as her ribcage was compressed and her limbs went numb, convinced she was gonna die. After about 30 minutes, a group of Egyptian women and 24 soldiers forced their way into the mob and carried her away. Logan was hospitalized, flown home the next day, and later went public to break the silence about mass sexual assaults in protest crowds and the risks constantly faced by women in volatile environments of men. Best known for playing Martin Corley on Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, 36-year-old actor Tyler Chase has become the next tragic reminder of Hollywood's child star curse. Fans recently spotted him homeless in Los Angeles and Riverside, sparking a GoFundMe for food and shelter. Concerned strangers began sharing videos of him on TikTok and rallying support to help get him back on his feet.
Hello, my name is Tyler Chase, and I'm here on a Christian movement for acting.
But Tyler's own mother has since urged people not to donate, insisting that the man needs medical treatment, not money, explaining that he can't manage finances or even his medications on his own, and giving him money may only worsen his situation. The ashes you get after cremating a body aren't really ashes at all. During the burn, soft tissues and organs completely vaporize into gas, and any true ash is swept away through the chamber's exhaust. What's left are small bone fragments, which are then ground up in a machine called a cremulator to create the fine sand-like remains families keep in urns or scatter across Disney World. Despite the Ride of Steel roller coasters posted rules and safety manual requiring riders to have 2 legs, Iraq War veteran Sergeant James Hackemer, who had lost both legs in combat, was still allowed to board the ride at Six Flags Darien Lake in 2011. Midway through the ride, he was violently ejected from his seat and killed instantly. In 2003, wrestling legend The Iron Sheik sat in a courtroom watching the man who had murdered his beloved daughter, Marissa. Hidden inside his mouth was a razor blade. His plan was to leap across the aisle and slit the killer's throat in front of a packed courtroom. But at the last moment, his family physically surrounded him, begging him not to throw his own life away, and he broke down in their arms. The killer was sentenced to life in prison, and in the years afterward, Sheik put down the drugs and worked hard to rebuild his life as a tribute to his daughter. On his grave in Stratford-upon-Avon, William Shakespeare left a chilling warning. "Blessed be the man who spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." Yet in 2016, ground-penetrating radar revealed a disturbing truth. The head of his grave showed signs of tampering, with a mysterious brick repair where his skull should be. The discovery gave new credence to a long-dismissed urban legend that grave robbers stole Shakespeare's skull in the late 1700s. 4 planes were hijacked on 9/11, but few people know there was almost a 5th. United Flight 23, bound for Los Angeles, was already taxiing for takeoff at JFK when the FAA suddenly grounded all aircraft after the Twin Towers were struck. Among the passengers were several men who immediately raised red flags with the crew. Flight attendants later said they were asking odd questions about the flight, demanding to move into first class, and even tried to open the cabin door before takeoff. When the grounding order came, the men reportedly refused to deplane at first, sitting in eerie silence while the other passengers panicked. Even more suspicious, after the flight was emptied, security discovered box cutters hidden in the seatbacks and food stashed under the seats, items disturbingly similar to those used by the 9/11 hijackers. Investigators came to believe Flight 23 was meant to be part of the coordinated plot, possibly targeting the White House or another iconic landmark. But because of the grounding order, the plane never left the runway, leaving behind one of the most chilling what-ifs of 9/11.